Good morning everybody, lovely to be back and I hope you're all doing well, and I'm going to tell you the second story of broccoli. And if you're not too sure who broccoli is, then you need to listen to the story that I told last week. And I'm going to tell you about the second time that I met my little friend broccoli. And the story actually starts once again when during the winter. It was the winter months when I first met broccoli, and it was the weekend, and I'd been actually thinking about broccoli for some time, and I hadn't actually had the chance to go up to Cuckoo Land for 2 or 3 weeks. I'd been very busy at home and very busy at school, and I hadn't had the chance to go and visit broccoli, and he'd actually told me to come and see him whenever I wanted to. That was the last thing that he'd actually said to me on our first meeting. So I was very excited about going through to Cuckoo Land again, but of course I hadn't, like I said, I hadn't had the chance to do that. So it was a Saturday morning when I woke up, and I thought, well, I have the morning free. I'm going to go up the mountain and go through into Cuckoo Land and spend some time with broccoli. And I was just about to get out of bed and get ready when I looked out of my window and something caught my eye at the very top of the mountain. And you have to go to the top of the mountain to get to broccoli, because that's where the hedge is and the small little hole that leads through to where he lives. And something caught my eye in the trees, and I had to look very carefully at it, and I couldn't see exactly what it was. So I reached for my binoculars and looked through my binoculars, and I saw a rainbow jacket, and I realized it was broccoli. And broccoli was sitting on the top of a tree, and he was rocking back and forth in the tree, right at the very top of the tree. And my first thought was, he's going to fall, because the tree was leaning over a long way either side. And I thought, he's never going to hold on to the top of the tree, he's going to fall out. And then of course I remembered what broccoli had told me on our first meeting, that people don't get hurt in Cuckoo Land. And then I realized that broccoli probably thought that even if he did fall from the tree, nothing was going to happen to him. I knew it was going to take me a long time to walk up the mountain, but I felt I had to get there as fast as I can, and hopefully broccoli would be safe. So I got dressed as quickly as I could, and I went to the back of my garden, and I squeezed through the bushes and crossed over the road and started walking up the path to the top of the mountain. And it took me quite a while, but when I got to the top and I looked around for broccoli, he was easy enough to see. He was still at the top of the tree and still rocking the tree back and forth. And the tree was a tall one. If he'd have fallen, he would have really hurt himself. I didn't want to frighten broccoli by shouting up at him in case he let go of the tree. So I did the best that I could just to call up to him and try and get his attention. And he looked down and saw me. And it was then that he fell out of the tree. And he fell from the top of the tree and started coming down, and he was going to be landing on his back. He was kind of falling back first. And I shouted out his name, and I actually remember getting ready to catch him because he's only very small, and I thought, well, if I can catch him, hopefully he won't be too badly hurt. And as he fell and got closer to the ground, something very strange happened, because he seemed to slow down. And when he got to a few feet above my head, he stopped completely, and he was still lying on his back. And then his feet turned to face the ground, and he came down very slowly, feet first, and stood next to me. And I looked at him in amazement, and I said, "Broccoli, how did you do that?" And he said, "Have you not heard of a yo-yo before?" And I said, "Well, I know what a yo-yo is, but how did you do that with a yo-yo?" And he said, "Well, have you ever seen a yo-yo like this?" And out of his pocket, he pulled a yo-yo. And it kind of looked like an ordinary yo-yo, apart from it was very, very bright. And it was divided into lots of different colours, very similar to his rainbow jacket. It had string wrapped around it, that you could put your finger through. So in that way it looked like a yo-yo that we would buy today. But apart from that, it was the colours that made it really interesting. And I asked to hold the yo-yo, and I had a good look at it, and then I handed it back to Broccoli. And I said to him, I still don't understand, Broccoli, how you managed to do what you've just done with the yo-yo. And he said, well, I guess you would call it a magic yo-yo, because you can fly with the yo-yo. And I said, fly with it? What do you mean? And he said, well, you can fly with the yo-yo. The yo-yo will take you up, and you can move around. And I said to him, well, if it's really true, could I have a go? And he said, well, sure, I guess so. I can teach you. It wouldn't take long. And then I remembered Hannah. Because Hannah, I told you in my first story, was my baby daughter. And I was looking after her that weekend, and I'd taken her up the mountain. And I sometimes kind of forgot about Hannah because she was always inside my winter jacket. And as soon as she was in my winter jacket, she would fall asleep. And I'd taken Hannah up the mountain with me. And I had kind of like a baby harness strapped around my chest. And I would put Hannah inside and zip up my thick winter coat so that she was nice and warm. And I could look down in her to check up on her as I walked. And I'd actually taken Hannah up the mountain with me because I couldn't obviously leave her at home alone. Excuse me. So Hannah was actually inside my winter jacket. And so I said to Broccoli, I don't think I can start trying to go up with a yo-yo, a magic yo-yo, when I've got my baby daughter. And Broccoli said to me, why don't you let me look after her? And I said to Broccoli, have you looked after babies before? And he said, well, no, but you could teach me, just like I'm going to teach you how to use the magic yo-yo. So I said, okay, Broccoli. So I unzipped my coat and I took Hannah out of the snuggly and I gave her to Broccoli. And immediately Broccoli seemed to know what he was doing. He was holding her correctly, and Hannah seemed quite happy, and I really wanted to have a go at this yo-yo. So I gave Broccoli a little bit of advice in case Hannah woke up and started crying, and then Broccoli showed me how to use the yo-yo. So what you have to do, Mr. I, he said, is you have to take the yo-yo and you have to throw it as hard as you can away from you. And then once you've thrown it, the yo-yo is going to start spinning. It won't fall onto the ground, it will start spinning. And all of those bright colours will get brighter and brighter, and it will start whirring. And when it's moving really quickly, so all the colours look like they join together, this yo-yo is going to come flying back at you. And the secret is you have to catch it. And as soon as you catch it, slip the string on your finger and hold the yo-yo to your chest, and your feet will start moving off the ground. Now at first I remember wondering whether Broccoli was actually playing a trick on me, playing a joke, because I couldn't believe this was really going to work. But anyway, I took the yo-yo from him and I threw the yo-yo away from me as hard as I could, and sure enough, the yo-yo didn't fall in the snow. It stopped and it turned and started spinning. And at first it was very slow, but it got quicker and quicker, and it started whirring, and I realised that the yo-yo was going to come back at me. So I got ready to catch the yo-yo, and the yo-yo flew back at me really quickly, and I put my hands out to catch the yo-yo, but it hit my hand so hard that I dropped the yo-yo, and the yo-yo fell into the snow and spun a hole into the snow, and Broccoli started laughing. And I dug the yo-yo out of the snow, and Broccoli told me to have a second try. So this time I threw the yo-yo away. I waited for it to start spinning, and when it spun, it flew back at me, and I got ready to catch it. But at the last moment I got frightened because the yo-yo was coming back so quickly. I ducked, and the yo-yo went over the top of my head and hit a tree. And again it fell into the snow and buried itself into the snow. And again Broccoli thought this was really funny. "You're supposed to catch it, Mr. R," he said. So I picked the yo-yo out And I tried for a third time, and I was determined to catch the yo-yo this time. And this time I didn't let go. I held hold of the yo-yo, and just as Broccoli had said, I slipped the string over my finger and I held the yo-yo to my chest, and then it started happening. My feet started moving off the ground, and it was a really strange feeling, as if somebody was pushing you from underneath. And I remember saying, "Broccoli, what do I do?" And he said, "Just let it happen, just keep on going up." And I got higher and higher, and I was about halfway up the tree when I shouted down to Broccoli, "How do I get it to stop?" And he said, "Take it away from your chest when you're ready and just point it and see what happens." So I started getting higher and higher up the tree. This was the tree that Broccoli had been playing in. And eventually I was level with the top of this tree, and still I was moving upwards. And eventually I thought, well, I'm definitely high enough, and I took the yo-yo away from my chest and I started pointing it in the direction I wanted to go. And the yo-yo, it was as if the yo-yo was pulling me in that direction. And believe it or not, I was kind of flying, and I was moving around. And it was very easy to do. All you had to do was point the yo-yo, and the yo-yo will pull you in that direction. If you pointed it upwards, you would start moving up, and you could point it down and start going back down again. It was pretty easy to do, and I started playing around with it. And after I got used to it, I went for a little circle in the sky, and I remember moving through, and the clouds had come down. And through the clouds I could see the top of a mountain, and I could see some people walking up the mountain, and I realized that the last thing I wanted was for them to look up and see me in the sky. So I moved the yo-yo up and disappeared above the clouds, and I was just on my way back when I saw an eagle below me, and the eagle looked up at the same time that I looked down, and the eagle gave me the strangest look and changed direction really quickly and flew off. So I did a big loop, and I was really enjoying myself at this stage, and I started looking for the tree where Broccoli was, and I found it quite quickly because of his rainbow jacket. The problem was I didn't really know how to get back down again, so again I shouted down at Broccoli, and Broccoli said, "It's really easy, just put the yo-yo back on your chest, but this time the other side of your chest, and you're going to stop and you'll start coming back down." So I got to the tree where Broccoli was, and I brought the yo-yo down, and this time I put it onto the other side of my chest, and sure enough I started coming back down again. And as I got closer and closer towards Broccoli, I looked down at Hannah, and Hannah had something in her mouth, and as I got closer and closer to the ground, I realized that Hannah had a pipe in her mouth. Now, for those of you who don't know what a pipe is, I'm afraid I don't have one with me. I actually have the pipe that Broccoli had given Hannah. A pipe is a little bit like a cigarette. You smoke it, you put tobacco in it. And Hannah had a pipe in her mouth. And I shouted down at Broccoli, I was so shocked, "Broccoli, you can't give a baby a pipe." And as I got down to the ground, I snatched the pipe out of Hannah's mouth, completely forgetting about the yo-yo. And Broccoli looked really upset. And he said to me, it's like candy. And I said, "What do you mean it's like candy? It's a pipe." And he said, "Look inside." So when I looked inside the bowl of the pipe, there wasn't tobacco inside there. Something inside there was crackling and bubbling. And it looked a little bit like what made the same sound as cereal makes when you pour milk on it, like Rice Krispies. These were little kind of pink, very, very small, like pink balls that were crackling inside the pipe. And he asked me to try it, so I put it in my mouth and sucked, and sure enough, it tasted very sweet. And Hannah had started crying and was reaching out because she wanted the pipe back. And I realised that Broccoli really had just given her some kind of candy that they used in cooking that. So I gave the pipe back to Hannah, and I apologised to Broccoli for being angry with him because he was still a little bit upset. And I asked Broccoli, hey Broccoli, is there any way that I could have one of these yo-yos? And he laughed and he said, Mr. R, I couldn't give you my magic yo-yo. We all had them in Cuckoo Land, so whenever you come to visit me, you're welcome to use it, but I can't give you my magic yo-yo, and we don't have any spares, and I don't think the head man would be very happy if I gave you a magic yo-yo and you started flying around with it, because then people would really want to find out where you got it from. And I realised that Broccoli was right. But after that, when I started visiting Broccoli more often, he would let me use his yo-yo, and I wasn't very good at using it. It was amazing watching some of the little people using their yo-yos, because they could do amazing tricks with them in the sky. They could swoop up and then turn and swoop down as if they're heading straight for the ground, and then change direction at the last moment. They were really clever with them, and they would have competitions in Cuckoo Land to see who was the best with their yo-yo. So quite a kind of short story this week, because that's really the end of the story. Broccoli took his yo-yo and I took Hannah back and went back down, and it was about a week later that I saw Broccoli again. But just before I go this week, I do want to show you something, because Broccoli over the years has given me things that I can take home with them, and one of them was one of his shoes. And so I've got one of his shoes to show you this time, and so here it is. This is one of Broccoli's shoes, and he's got lots and lots of shoes, but I just thought it might be an idea to bring this in to show you guys, to give you an idea of how small Broccoli is. So that is one of Broccoli's shoes, and you can see how beautifully decorated it is at the top, and I've just put something inside it, just some tissue paper, to give you an idea how wide his foot is. So that's one of Broccoli's real shoes. So I'll put that back there. So that's the end of the story this week. Like I say, quite a short story this week. I look forward to seeing all of you next week. Stay safe, and I will see you next week. Bye everyone.